Hello and welcome to Wednesday Interlude, in which I present the second episode in the Norman and Plantagenet series. In my introductory episode, I discussed the forebears of William the Conqueror and the establishment of Normandy. See the first episode in the info cards above. Now we need to travel across the Channel to discuss the situation as it was during the period in which the Vikings were establishing a foothold in northern France. But before we do that, let's just take another look at the timeline of the Dukes of Normandy. I wish to draw your attention to the dates for Robert I, William's father. In 1027-28, Robert became Duke of Normandy after the Battle for Flanders, and William was born around the same time. So here is a timeline for William beginning in 1028. At the age of 5, William was appointed Duke of Normandy, while his father, Robert, went to the Holy Land on pilgrimage. Robert died on his way back from Jerusalem, and so at the age of 8, William was confirmed as the Duke of Normandy. There followed a dangerous and turbulent time for William, as several factions wanted William out of the way and attempted to take over the dukedom. He survived due to the support of his mother's relatives, and at the age of 18, William took control of the army and embarked on a series of wars, either against Norman rebels or neighbouring states. His successes as a ruthless campaigner earned for him a formidable reputation. At about the age of 24, William made a brilliant marriage to Matilda of Flanders. Flanders is to the northeast of Normandy. Considering that he was the illegitimate son of Robert I and that she was descended from royalty, it can be considered a triumphant outcome, attributable, no doubt, to his outstanding prowess as a military commander and as a successful general. Matilda's father was Count Baldwin V, the ruler of Flanders. Her mother, Adela, was the sister of Robert II, the King of France. Matilda was also connected to Normandy through her grandmother Eleanor, who was William's aunt. Her grandfather had also married the sister of Robert of Normandy. Thus Matilda had Saxon, Norman, Flemish and French royal blood. But Matilda was not only descended from the royal house of France, but King Alfred the Great was also an ancestor of hers, because Alfred's daughter Elstreth had married Baldwin II of Flanders. So now we can view the slide showing the kings of England from Alfred the Great through to Ethelred the Unready, who figures in our story. Alfred and his son Edward the Elder were kings of Wessex. Here is a map showing the location of Wessex, which is derived from West Saxons. This is roughly the area made famous by Thomas Hardy, who set all of his novels in Wessex. Athelstan was the first king of England. There followed 5 more kings until Ethelred the Unready, who ruled from 978 to 1013. William's aunt, Emma, who was known as the Flower of Normandy, married Ethelred, and they had 2 sons, Edward and Alfred. Ethelred also had a son from a previous marriage, Edmond. When Ethelred died, the land of England was shared between Ethelred's son Edmond and Canute, who had a claim to the English throne through his father Sweyn Forkbeard of Denmark, who had invaded and conquered England previously. But this is another story. Edmund died within a few months, and thus Canute became king of all England. Emma then married Canute, and they had a son between them called Hardicanute, and they agreed to disinherit Emma's sons by Ethelred, Edward and Alfred, and also Canute's son, Harold Harefoot, from his previous marriage. Thus, when Canute died, there were several contenders for the throne of England: Harold, Hardicanute and Edward. So, in spite of being disinherited, Harold Hereford, Canute's eldest son, seized the throne on the death of his father and held it for nearly 5 years, when it was taken over by Hardicanute for 2 more years, until Edward, with the help of William, invaded England from France, where he had been living in exile, and claimed the throne for himself, and he held it for 24 years. And even though Edward had promised William that he would succeed him to the throne of England, he appointed Harold Godwinson as his successor, because he believed that only Harold would be accepted as king. Edward died on the 5th of January 1066, and Earl Harold was proclaimed king and was crowned the next day. This was the catalyst for William to gather an army together and to invade England, and at 9 a.m. on the 28th of September in 1066, William arrived at Pevensey Bay on the south coast of England. Meanwhile, Harold was in the north of England, where another invasion had taken place. Hardrada, the king of Norway, who was a famous Viking warrior, and Tostig, Harold's brother, had invaded northern England with the intention of putting Tostig on the English throne. However, Harold successfully put down the uprising, and both Hardrada and Tostig were killed at the Battle of Stamford Bridge on the 25th of September 1066. So Harold, flushed with success, hearing of William's invasion, rode south to encounter William, who had moved to Hastings. Harold's strategy of marching a weary army south was a recipe for disaster. On the morning of the 14th of October 1066, Harold was killed when an arrow pierced his eye. Thus all resistance was temporarily ended, and there was no one left to successfully oppose him, and so William rode in triumph to London, where he was crowned as King of England on Christmas Day, the 25th of December 1066. There were a few further outbreaks of opposition, most famously by Hereward the Wake, but by 1071 William had subdued the whole country, wiping out the native English aristocracy and establishing Norman rule, and thereafter William's hold on England was fairly secure. Now let us consider William and Matilda's 4 sons. Here is a timeline of their approximate births. I'm only going to introduce them briefly in this episode, but we'll discuss them more fully in episode 3 of this series. Robert was born in approximately 1053, a year or two after William and Matilda were married. As the eldest son, he was the heir to the dukedom of Normandy, and from a young age Robert was passionately desirous of assuming the title. Richard was born in approximately 1055, and he was a typical Norman, tall and handsome, and when William conquered England he was promised the throne of England as his father's successor. William, called Rufus, was born in approximately 1057 and was next in line after his brother Richard. The fourth brother, Henry, was born in England in 1068, 2 years after William became king. We will explore what happened to these brothers in the next exciting episode in the Norman and Plantagenet series.